Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Focus on Christ podcast, episode number 9. I am so excited that you have decided to tune in today and join us. I can't wait to share with you what I have to share with you today. It is going to be super exciting. I know you're going to enjoy it, and I just can't wait to get the information out there. However, before we get started, I want to go over just a couple things and make sure that you're connected with us so that you can stay on track to make sure you're getting this podcast. If you haven't already, if you're just tuning in right now, go ahead and just hit pause, go over and subscribe to our podcast so you can get these on a regular basis. We send out several of them a week. I want to make sure you have access to them, so make sure you get subscribed. Also, make sure you've liked our Facebook page and our Instagram page, and so that you can stay current with all the new content that's coming out and the daily inspirational posts that go up. There's also some live teachings that go out, usually on a daily basis, not quite every day, but usually on a daily basis. I'll be trying to teach something on there and sharing with you something that's going on in my life. The reason is because we all have a unique leadership journey, and I want to share mine with you so you can see how I'm just a regular guy, just like you, trying to get this Christian walk figured out. And every day is a little bit unique and a little bit different, and some days are really good and some days aren't so good. So anyway, I want to make sure you check those out. Today we're going to be covering another law from the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. I know I've shared with you before. I'm going to share with you again. This is one of my favorite leadership books. It's one of the most popular leadership books of all time, if not the best-selling of all time at this point. John C. Maxwell is one of my mentors, and he is an awesome, awesome guy. And he has a way of making complex things simple. And that's truly a gift that not everyone has. I can definitely relate to not having it so well. I tend to, throughout my life, I've always tended to make things a little bit more complex. And as I've learned through my life, the reason that I tend to do that is because it allows me to develop a sense of status and pride. And that's why people make things complex, is because it gives us a sort of a ego boost when we do that, where the real gift is making complex things simple so that we can share them with more people and so that we can connect with more people and more people can win every single day. And that's pretty awesome. So John's great at that. I'm very thankful to have him as a mentor in my life. The law that we're going to be going over today is one of my favorites. Of course, like every other law in this book, they're all literally my favorites. They're just really awesome. You cannot have a fantastic leadership journey and leave a single one of these out. Now, there's going to be ones that you're much stronger in than others, and there's going to be some that you aren't as good at, and that's where you need to surround yourself with a very close group of people that will lift you in the areas where you're weak. And so they can kind of cover that gap for you. So you're going to have a leadership gap, and they're going to be able to cover some of that for you. So you can either grow some of that up, or maybe they just need to cover it for you because that's not one of your strengths. You need to, if you don't know what your strengths are, that can be a little bit of a challenge, and that's obviously something I can help you with over at focusonchrist.com. However, we want to go ahead and jump into the law of intuition today. The law of intuition states that leaders evaluate everything with a leadership bias. I love this law. Law of intuition. Leaders evaluate everything with a leadership bias. When you see a situation in life, how do you view it? I have two lenses that I view things through. One's a marketing lens, because everything is being marketed. And that's a really, really a good thing. That's how our world works, and that's how people's lives are improved and made better. So that's a good thing. I evaluate it through a leadership bias, or I tend to call it more of a leadership lens. I see everything through the leadership impact. That doesn't mean I get it always right. Hear me real well on this. I'm not touting my own tooting my own horn rather. I'm not trying to lift myself up and put myself on a pedestal. I'm saying that anytime I see something, I try to the best of my ability to evaluate it through a leadership lens, because everything rises and falls on leadership. And leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. And so it is so important that when we see things happening in life, we look at them through the leadership lens. How would a leader look at this? What if there's a problem or a situation? You can either talk about the problem or you can solve the problem. You have two choices. The leaders solve problems. They don't talk about problems. They don't talk about people. They solve problems, and they lift people up, and they help them, and they encourage them. But you have to see things through a leadership lens in order to be able to do those things. And so we're going to talk today about the law of intuition, and we're going to look at it from a biblical perspective. We're going to look at some Bible stories here in just a second, and we're going to examine that law of intuition. The first passage that we're going to look at today is out of Exodus. It's Exodus 18, verses 1 through 24. Exodus 18, verses 1 through 24. And so you can also think about the law of intuition, which states that leaders evaluate everything through a leadership bias, as kind of this, think of it as informed intuition. So there's sometimes we're going to have leaders have an intuition about things because they've been looking at things through this leadership lens for so long that they have an intuition about that. And intuition is, there's two ways that intuition happens in my mind. There may be more that you want to categorize it as, but in my mind there's two ways that intuition happens. Intuition happens because the Spirit is guiding you and directing you to a certain thing that God wants you to do. Or intuition happens because you have a gut feeling based upon experiences that you have of that allow you to rapidly and quickly form accurate opinions and assessments of given when you see a certain set of think of them as clues. I had one person I worked with one time that defined intuition as the ability to look around the corner of time. So intuition is the ability to look around the corner of time. I really like that definition because that's exactly what it is. It's your ability to see something that's not there ahead of it happening. That's intuition. And that can come from God, or it can come from that wealth of experience and knowledge and trusting your gut and having a refined gut, though. Trusting your gut when it's never experienced anything doesn't count for much. But trusting your gut when when you have a wealth of experience to lean upon and a lot of training, resources, education, and evaluated experience, man, that can be just an awesome thing. And it can really make a huge difference in your effectiveness. As a leader, I often relied on my gut when it came to hiring people, because I had such a depth and a breadth and depth of experience working with people that my brain would automatically intuitively see things that I couldn't see actively. And so I was able to make better decisions by trusting my gut. And every time I ignored my gut, I paid a price. And so while that is anecdotal reinforcement, it's that kind of that you're looking for, it's that confirmation bias sort of thing. I still trust my gut a whole lot, and I know a lot of people that do, because it can sense and do things that we can't actively think about. So let's go ahead and dive in here to Exodus chapter 18. And Jethro, the priest of Midian, Moses' father-in-law, heard of all that God had done for Moses and for Israel his people, that the Lord had brought Israel out of Egypt. Then Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, took Zipporah, Moses' wife, after he had sent her back, with her 2 sons, of whom the name of one was Gershom, for he said, I have been a stranger in a foreign land, and the name of the other was Eleazar, for he said, the God of my father was my help, and delivered me from the sword of Pharaoh. And Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, came with his sons and his wife to Moses in the wilderness, where he encamped at the mountain of God. Now he had said to Moses, I, your father-in-law, Jethro, am coming to you, with your wife and her 2 sons with her. So Moses went out to meet his father-in-law and bowed down and kissed him. And they asked each other about their well-being. And they went into the tent. And Moses told his father-in-law of all that the Lord had done to Pharaoh, and all the Egyptians for Israel's sake, all of the hardship that had come upon them on the way, and how the Lord had delivered them. Then Jethro rejoiced for all the good which the Lord had done for Israel, whom he had delivered out of the hand of the Egyptians. And Jethro said, Blessed be the Lord, who delivered you out of the hand of the Egyptians, out of the hand of Pharaoh, and who has delivered you from the people under the hand of the Egyptians. Now I know that the Lord is greater than all the gods, for in the very thing in which they behaved proudly, he was above them. Then Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, took a burnt offering and other sacrifices to offer to God. And Aaron came with all the elders of Israel to eat bread with Moses' father-in-law before God. And so it was on the next day that Moses sat to judge the people. And the people stood before Moses morning until evening. So when Moses' father-in-law saw all that he did for the people, he said, "What is this thing that you are doing for the people? Why do you do it alone? Why do you alone sit, and all the people stand before you from morning until evening?" And Moses said to his father-in-law, "Because the people came to me to inquire of God. When they have a difficulty, they come to me, and I judge between one and another, and I make known the statutes of God and his laws." So Moses' father-in-law said to him, "The thing that you do is not good. Both you and these people who are with you will surely wear yourselves out. For this thing is too much for you. You are not able to perform it by yourself. Listen to my voice. I will give you counsel, and God will be with you. Stand before God for all the people, so that you may bring the difficulties to God. And you shall teach them the statutes and the laws, and show them the way in which they must walk, and the work they must do. Moreover, you shall select from all these people able men, such as fear God, men of truth, hating covetousness, and place such over them to be rulers of thousands, rulers of hundreds, rulers of 50s, and rulers of 10. And let them judge the people at all times. Then it will be that every great matter that they bring to you, then it will be that every great matter they shall bring to you, but every small matter they themselves shall judge. So it will be easier for you, for they will bear the burden for you. If you do this thing, and God so commands you, then you will be able to endure, and all this people will go to their place in peace." This is this is really an interesting story that Jethro brings to Moses. Moses has been leading the people for so long that he is, and through such difficulties, and he shared that with his father-in-law, and then his father-in-law immediately was able to see the challenge and the problem that Moses was facing, and he's recommending that he sets up a in our society today, we think of our judicial system. We have our I don't know what their technical names are, but you have judges at the city level, and you have judges at the county level, and you have judges at I think there's a circuit level, and then you have judges at the state level, and you have judges at the federal level, and I'm sure that there's other judges in there somewhere that I don't know about at all. That's not my, I don't have any idea. I just know that there are different levels of judges. And so Jethro immediately sees this need. Jethro is he's his father-in-law, so there is a good chance that he has some age on him and some experience that Moses doesn't have. And so Jethro is able to walk into this environment, listen to the story, and watch what Moses is doing, and look at his life from the outside and say, "Moses, you got to make some adjustments here." And he's not doing it. You'll notice that he doesn't do it in a way that takes away any respect for God or any respect for what Moses has done. He does it in a way that is gentle and easy for Moses to say, "Oh yeah, why couldn't I see that?" And Moses just isn't able to see it yet. He hasn't. He either doesn't have the experience, or it's not for him to see, or whatever. But we see Jethro stepping in and using the law of intuition, where Jethro's able to see that this problem is going to wear Moses completely out if he doesn't fix it early on. That's one of the powers of mentors in your life. Okay, I'm going to take a segue here and just address one point here. If you do not have a mentor in your life, you're really missing out. And I mean that in the nicest way, because you may not have a mentor. And I don't mean a mentor as a buddy that you side up to, or someone that you can confess what you did on the weekend to. That's not what a mentor does. A mentor is someone that has gone before. They are someone that has experienced things before, and that they can guide you through that same thing. So you're going to have different mentors for different phases of your life. So that's my little thing on mentorship. I just want to encourage you, if you don't have a mentor in your life, to get one now and figure out what that looks like for you, and get one, because every phase of your life you're going to need a different mentor, and you'll probably going to need more than one, because if you're anything like me, and I bet you are, because I'm literally just like you. I am a two-legged human being, and I have my faults and failures, and I'm just like you. I'm nobody special. And I know that I have multiple weaknesses in my life, and maybe I need a mentor for fitness, I need a mentor for coaching, I need a mentor for business, and they're all different, and they have different strengths and weaknesses, and they're going to bring different things into your game. And it may be that you aren't able to have one right now, but if you can, reach out and grab one. If you have to pay for it, pay for it. It'll be so worth it. Trust me on that. Let's go ahead and dive back in. I just wanted to segue on that for a second. Let's go into 1 Kings here. We're going to slide over here to 1 Kings. We're going to be looking in chapter 3. This is going to be a story from Solomon. King Solomon, the wisest man that walked the earth. Not taking anything away from Christ. I get it. Hear my heart. So we're going to be reading chapter 3, verse 3 through 28. That's 3 through the end of the chapter. It says, "And Solomon loved the Lord, walking in the statutes of his father David, except that he sacrificed and burnt incense at the high places. Now the king went to Gibeon to sacrifice there, for that was the great high place. Solomon offered 1,000 burnt offerings on that altar. At Gibeon the Lord appeared to Solomon in a dream by night, and God said, 'Ask, what shall I give you?' And Solomon said, 'You have shown great mercy to your servant David my father, because he walked before you in truth, in righteousness, and in uprightness of heart with you. You have continued this great kindness for him, and you have given him a son to sit on his throne, and it is this day. Now, O Lord my God, you have made your servant king instead of my father David. But I am a little child, and I do not know how to go out or come in. And your servant is in the midst of your people, whom you have chosen, a great people, too numerous to be numbered or counted. Therefore, give to your servant an understanding heart to judge your people, that I may discern between good and evil. For who is able to judge this great people of yours?'" Here we see Solomon asking God to have a greater measure of the law of intuition. What an amazing request. Solomon could have asked God for absolutely anything. We're getting ready to see the rest of that story play out. So it's just amazing that he would think of the law of intuition to ask God for that wisdom. And I say that the law of intuition does not equal wisdom. It's not the law of wisdom, it's the law of intuition. There's a lot more to it than that. However, the way that Solomon phrases it here, he's looking for that ability to see into the future on how to care for his people so that he can take care of them better. So he's looking into that future. The speech pleased the Lord that Solomon had asked this thing. Then God said to him, "Because you have asked this thing, and have not asked for long life for yourself, nor asked for riches for yourself, nor have asked for the life of your enemies, but have asked for yourself understanding and discerning justice. Behold, I have done according to your words. See, I have given you a wise and understanding heart, so that there has not been anyone like you before you, nor shall any like you arise after you. And I have also given you what you have not asked, both riches and honor, so that there shall not be anyone like you among the kings all your days. So if you walk in my ways and keep my statutes and my commandments, as your father David walked, then I will lengthen your days." Then Solomon awoke, and indeed it had been a dream. And he came to Jerusalem and stood before the ark of the covenant of the Lord, offered up burnt offerings, offered peace offerings, and made a feast for all of his servants. Now we're getting ready to enter the story where we always call it wisdom. However, there is this element of intuition involved in this coming story. Now 2 women who were harlots came to the king and stood before him. And one woman said, "O my lord, this woman and I dwell in the same house, and I gave birth while she was in the house. Then it happened the 3rd day after I had given birth that this woman also gave birth. And we were together, and no one was with us in the house except for the 2 of us in the house. And this woman's son died in the night because she lay on him. So she arose in the middle of the night and took my son from my side while your maidservant slept, and laid him in my bosom. and laid her dead child in my bosom. And when I arose in the morning to nurse my son, there he was, dead. But when I examined him in the morning, indeed, he was not my son whom I had borne. Then the other woman said, No, but the living one is my son, and the dead one is your son. And the first woman said, No, but the dead one is your son, and the living one is my son. Thus they spoke before the king. And the king said, The one says, This is my son who lives, and your son is the dead one. And the other says, No, but your son is the dead one, and my son is the living one. Then the king said, Bring me a sword. So they brought a sword before the king, and the king said, Divide the living child in two, and give one half to one and half to the other. Then the woman whose son was living spoke to the king, for she yearned with compassion for her son, and said, Oh my God, give her the living child, and by no means kill him. But the other said, Let him be neither mine nor yours, but divide him. So the king answered and said, Give the first woman the living child, and by no means kill him, for she is its mother. And all Israel heard of the judgment which the king had rendered, and they feared the king, for they saw the wisdom of God was in him to administer justice. This is a fantastic way to look at the law of intuition through wisdom. Solomon has yes, he has been given divine wisdom by God. I'm not trying to take that away at all. However, as this story is playing out, what we're seeing is that Solomon has been given this wisdom. He also sees through the law of intuition the heart of the woman whose son it really was. We would all like to think that would be a natural course of action for any one of us in any given situation. However, a lot of times that's not the case in leadership. We don't always make those righteous or correct decisions because our intuition may not be dialed into the situation that we're dealing with at that particular given time. So this is a great story about the law of intuition. We're going to go over to 2 Kings chapter 3 now. We're going to look at another story. So 2 Kings chapter 3. We're going to be starting in verse 9 this time. So starting in verse 9. So the king of Israel went with the king of Judah and the king of Edom, and they marched on that roundabout route 7 days. And there was no water for the army, nor for the animals that followed them. And the king of Israel said, Alas, for the Lord has called these 3 kings together to deliver them into the hand of Moab. But Jehoshaphat said, Is there no prophet of the Lord here, that we may inquire of the Lord by him? So one of the servants of the king of Israel answered and said, Elisha the son of Shaphat is here, who poured water on the hands of Elijah. So Jehoshaphat said, The word of the Lord is with him. So the king of Israel said, Jehoshaphat and the king of Edom said, The word of the Lord is with him. So the king of Israel and Jehoshaphat and the king of Edom went down to him. Then Elisha said to the king of Israel, What do I have to do with you? Go to the prophets of your father and the prophets of your mother. But the king of Israel said to him, No, for the Lord has called these 3 kings together to deliver them into the hands of Moab. And Elisha said, As the Lord of hosts lives, before whom I stand, surely were it not that I regarded the presence of Jehoshaphat king of Judah, I would not look at you nor see you. But now bring me a musician. Then it happened that when the musician played, that the hand of the Lord came upon him. And he said, Thus says the Lord, Make this valley full of ditches. For thus the Lord says, You shall not see wind, nor shall you see rain, yet that valley shall be filled with water, so that your cattle and your animals may drink. And this is a simple matter in the sight of the Lord. He will also deliver the Moabites into your hands. Also, you shall attack every fortified city and every choice city, and shall cut down every good tree, and stop up every spring of water, and ruin every good piece of land with stones. Now it happened in the morning, when the grain offering was offered, that suddenly water came by way of Edom, and the land was filled with water. And when all the Moabites heard that the kings had come up to fight against them, all who were able to bear arms and older were gathered, and they stood at the border. Then they rose up early in the morning, and the sun was shining on the water, and the Moabites saw the water on the other side as red as blood. And they said, "This is blood. The kings have surely struck swords and have killed one another. Now therefore, Moab, go to the spoil." So they came up to the camp of Israel. Israel rose up and attacked the Moabites, so that they fled before them, and they entered their land, killing the Moabites. Then they destroyed the cities, and each man threw a stone on every good piece of land and filled it. And they stopped up all the springs of water and cut down all the good trees. But they left the stones of Hareseth intact. However, the slingers surrounded and attacked it. And then the king of Moab saw that the battle was too fierce for him, and he took with him 700 men who drew swords to break through to the king of Edom, but they could not. Then he took his eldest son, who would have reigned in his place, and offered him as a burnt offering upon the wall, and there was great indignation against Israel, so they departed from him and returned to their own land. Here's a story where we talk about Elisha and about these kings. And part of being a good leader is that you have to be able to think strategically. And you have to be able to assess your assets and your liabilities and use them as is going to, and I say use them, but you have to, I guess use is the right term here. You have to use them in a way that's going to allow you to accomplish the mission that you've been given. So this can be, in this case, it was Elisha, where the kings had to think strategically. They had an army, so you're talking a very large army that hadn't had anything to, they didn't have, there was no water available for them 7 days, so they were literally, whatever they packed in was what they had. So if they didn't, I don't know the exact condition, I don't know how much water they were going to bring with them on this march, but I know from being in the military for so many years that if you don't have access to clean water every now and then, it gets really, really rough. And so that's one of the things that you always factor in as a consideration when you're moving an army is water. And so at this point they were running low on water, so strategically they had to make a decision on what to do, and so they turned to Elisha in this particular case. We're going to go over to 2 Chronicles chapter 10 now. Second Chronicles chapter 10, we're going to be looking at the story of Rehoboam. This is the revolt against Rehoboam. And Rehoboam went to Shechem, for all Israel had gone to Shechem to make him king. So it happened when Jeroboam the son of Nebat heard it, he was in Egypt, where he had fled from the presence of King Solomon, that Jeroboam returned to Egypt. Then they sent for him and called him, and Jeroboam and all Israel came out and spoke to Rehoboam, saying, "Your father made our yoke heavy. Now therefore lighten the burden of service of your father, and his heavy yoke which he put on us, and we will serve you." So he said to them, "Come back to me after 3 days," and the people departed. Then King Rehoboam consulted the elders who stood before his father Solomon while he still lived, saying, "How do you advise me to answer these people?" And they spoke to him, saying, "If you are kind to these people and please them and speak good words to them, they will be your servants forever." But he rejected the advice which the elders had given him, and consulted the young men who had grown up with him, who stood before him. And he said to them, "What advice do you give? How should we answer these people who have spoken to me, saying, 'Lighten the yoke which your father put on us'?" Then the young men who had grown up with him spoke, saying, "Thus you shall speak to the people who have spoken to you, saying, 'Your father made our yoke heavy, but you make it lighter on us.' Thus you shall say to them, 'My little finger shall be thicker than my father's waist. And now, whereas my father put a heavy yoke on you, I will add to your yoke. My father chastised you with whips, but I will chastise you with scourges.'" So Jeroboam and all the people came to Rehoboam on the 3rd day, as the king had directed, saying, "Come back to me on the 3rd day." Then the king answered them roughly. King Rehoboam rejected the advice of the elders, and he spoke to them according to the advice of the young men, saying, My father made your yoke heavy, but I will add to it. My father chastised you with whips, but I will chastise you with scourges. So the king did not listen to the people, for the turn of events was from God, that the Lord might fulfill his word, which he had spoken by the hand of Ahijah the Shilonite, to Jeroboam the son of Nebat. Now when all Israel saw that the king did not listen to them, the people answered the king, saying, What share have we in David? We have no inheritance in the son of Jesse. For every man to your tents, O Israel. Now see to your own house, O David. So all of Israel departed to their tents. But Rehoboam reigned over the children of Israel who dwelt in the cities of Judah. Really, really interesting story here about Rehoboam and how he sought counsel from two groups of individuals about what he should do and how he should govern the nation of Israel. And this talk about the yoke and increasing the yoke and the weight of the yoke and all that story there is just really fascinating. And this is an exact example of how the law of intuition doesn't work. This is how the law of intuition is misused, and I wouldn't say it backfires because Rehoboam wasn't using the law of intuition. He was a great example of how not to use it, because if he was a good leader, if he had more experience, if he had listened to the wise counsel, they would have given him that experience and fed into his intuition so that he could have made a better decision. But instead, he turned to his peers, his contemporaries, people of his same age. He didn't seek out mentorship. He didn't seek out someone that was wiser than him. He wanted to do things his own way, and so he ignored the law of intuition. And we'll see later in the story that it doesn't work out for him very well. But this is what happens to a lot of young leaders that don't know how to ask good questions and to get good mentorship in their life. They don't have the seasoned intuition yet to know what to do, and so they make a lot of mistakes in their leadership, and mistakes are okay. However, if you have the ability to go ask good questions and consult with mentors like he did, he had great wise men around him, and he chose to ignore them. And it says here that this was from God so that the Lord could fulfill his work. So we understand that there was a greater story at play here. I get that, but I wanted to share this with you because this is a great example of what happens when we violate the law of intuition. We're going to go over to Proverbs chapter 8. We don't go to the Proverbs very often, but we're going to go there today. Proverbs 8 and verses 15 and 16. By me kings reign and rulers decree justice. By me princes rule, nobles, and nobles, all the judges of the earth. So this is a wisdom proverb. So I'm going to read it again. I want you to think about it in the context of wisdom and how that relates to intuition. So verses 15, by me kings reign and rulers decree justice. By me princes rule and nobles, all the judges of the earth. The syntax of that makes it a little bit difficult to understand, so I wanted to make sure I got it. I read it to you again because it was a little bit challenging there. But when we look at this, is a wisdom proverb, and it's talking, and it's by wisdom kings reign and rulers decree justice. By wisdom princes rule and nobles, all the judges of the earth. The law of intuition is so critical and so powerful to us as leaders that we learn how to use it, and that we learn how to let it govern certain portions of our life. However, it doesn't come to us by accident. So let's go over to Zephaniah. Zephaniah chapter 2, verses 1 through 3. Zephaniah chapter 2, verses 1 through 3. It says, "Gather yourselves together, yes, gather together, O undesirable nation, before the decree is issued, or the day passes like chaff, before the Lord's fierce anger comes upon you, before the day of the Lord's anger comes upon you. Seek the Lord, all you meek of the earth, who have upheld his justice. Seek righteousness, seek humility. It may be that you will be hidden in the day of the Lord's anger." If you want to develop the ability to see things intuitively and to be able to evaluate things through that leadership lens, it's important that you start by working inside of you. As a leader, it's so easy to say, boy, if I could just get this employee to change this habit, if I could just get this employee to do this thing, if I could just get them to change just a little bit to become a better person, it would be, what could I do in their life? How could I help them if I could just get them to change? The thing is that you have to change before anyone else will change. The only person that you can change is you. That's the only person you'll ever be able to change in your life is you. And so you got to start on the inside rather than on the outside with somebody else. And that's what this passage is talking about. It says here, "Seek the Lord, all of you meek of the earth, who have upheld justice. Seek righteousness, seek humility. It may be that you will be hidden in the day of the Lord's anger." This righteousness and humility start on the inside. You don't seek righteousness outside. You don't seek humility outside. Those are things that have to happen inside you before that you can grow into who you want to be. And the same thing is happening with intuition. You have to grow as an individual and you have to grow as a leader, as well as have all those experiences. Those experiences that you have in life, they allow the law of intuition to work. They only allow that if you have reflected on your experiences in life and then you have grown through that process as a result. So we're going to now we're going to go over to the New Testament. We have two passages in the New Testament. We're going to be back in the book of James here, in James 3. So we're looking at James chapter 3, verses 13 through 18. James 3, 13 through 18. And remember, this is the book on practical Christianity. "So who is wise and understanding among you? Let him show by good conduct that his works are done in the meekness of wisdom. But if you have a bitter enemy and self-seeking in your hearts, do not boast and lie against the truth. This wisdom does not descend from above, but is earthly, sensual, demonic. For every envy and self-seeking exists. For where envy and self-seeking exist, confusion and every evil thing are there. But the wisdom that is from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, willing to yield, full of mercy and good fruits, without partiality and without hypocrisy. Now the fruit of righteousness is sown in peace by those who make peace." So here you can see the difference between godly and worldly wisdom. So we see the good fruits without partiality or hypocrisy. We see those wisdom is pure, peaceable, gentle, willing to yield, full of mercy and good fruit, without partiality or hypocrisy. We see those contrasted against the what he calls sensual and demonic traits. And as leaders, if we want to develop a good sense of intuition and we want to be able to lean into that wisdom that God's giving us through that intuition, then we have got to manage our core values well. We have to keep our moral compass straight. I have a period of my life where I had a sin in my life, and it's just for the sake of this podcast, I'm not going to share the entire story with, but I had a sin in my life. I knew that sin was in my life, and I had refused to repent about it for a really, really long time. And at the same time, I was standing in the pulpit preaching. I was teaching Bible classes every week. I was teaching a Bible class, whether it be on Sunday or Sunday evening or Wednesday evening. I was teaching a Bible class and I was preaching from the pulpit, and I had this sin in my life. And I just wonder, I wonder every single day how much I impeded the Spirit's work within my life and in the lives of the people that I encountered because I refused to repent and to turn that sin over to God. And that's what this passage is talking about here, is that you have, who knows what would have happened in my life? What would my level of wisdom and intuition be now if I had simply turned that sin over at a little bit earlier time in my life and given it over to God? Because the two cannot coexist. We boil it down to that simple phrase: you cannot serve God and mammon. You can't serve God and money. So we boil it down to something simple as like that. You cannot serve two masters. And I'm going to get the quote wrong, but you're going to desire to serve one and at the detriment to the other. And this goes into that a little bit more. It gives you some very specific things here to think about. These things, when you get them right, they help build that wisdom within you, and they help bolster the law of intuition and make that more effective in your life. We're going to look at one last passage. It's in 1 John 4. 1 John chapter 4. Getting real close to the end of the Bible here. But this is the last passage we're going to talk about with the law of intuition today. So we're going to be reading verses 1 through 8. So 1 through 8. It says, "Beloved, do not believe every spirit, but test the spirits, whether they are of God, because many false prophets have gone out into the world. By this you know the Spirit of God. Every spirit that confesses that Jesus Christ has come in the flesh is of God, and every spirit that does not confess that Christ has come in the flesh is not of God. And this is the spirit of the Antichrist, which you have heard was coming, and is now already in the world. But you are of God, little children, and have overcome them, because he who is in you is greater than he who is in the world. They are of the world, therefore they speak as of the world, and the world hears them. We are of God. He who knows God hears us. He who is not of God does not hear us. But this we know, the spirit of truth and the spirit of error. Beloved, let us love one another, for love is of God, and everyone who loves is born of God and knows God. He who does not love does not know God, for God is love." This is there's a lot going on here, and I want to keep it in the context of the law of intuition and wisdom. You, as a leader, you also have to have what we can very well call a discerning spirit. You have to be able to look at a situation and frame it quickly and make a decision based upon your intuition and wisdom through intuition that guides you in the right direction. And this passage here talks about some of the challenges that they were facing back in the New Testament time period, where they were getting mixed messages because people were coming in that were speaking of the Spirit, but and he's telling them, how do we test this to make sure it's right? As leaders, we have the same challenge. We have to test what we see and what we hear and measure it based upon our experience and good judgment, and through our mentors. Sometimes we have to get sounding boards to base our decisions on, and then we have to rely on our intuition and to make those good decisions. So this brings us to the end of the law of intuition. Like I said, this is one of my favorite leadership laws. It's the ability to see things through a leadership bias. When you encounter situations and you're processing information, you always have to do it through that framework of leadership. When you leave the leadership aspect out, I mean, quite frankly, what are you even making a decision for? Maybe that's speaking a little strongly there, but you life is, every aspect of it is either helping you to climb the leadership ladder or it's taking you down the leadership ladder. Life is not static, it's kind of on a slope. So you're either going up or you're going down, but you're not staying here in the middle. You can't stay in the middle. So leadership, everything that happens in your life has to be framed in that context of leadership. And it's either going to take you up or it's going to take you down, but it's never going to leave you right in the middle. And so that's the law of intuition. It's framing everything through that leadership lens, or that looking at everything through that leadership bias. I hope today's podcast has helped you understand the law of intuition a little bit better, particularly through the biblical perspective and looking at Bible stories and the leadership examples that they are in our life. I hope that when you read your Bible every single day, that you are able to frame that and how can I apply this not only in my life, but in my leadership as well, my self-leadership and my leadership of whatever organization or team that I might happen to be working with at that given time. If you have any questions, I want to encourage you to drop your questions in the comments. Whether you see this on YouTube or you listen to it on a podcast, or if you find it on Facebook or something like that, make sure you drop some comments in there if you have questions. I'd love to talk to you about your questions on the law of intuition or any other laws that we've covered in the back episodes so far. If you haven't subscribed to our podcast and listened to some of the other episodes, I want to encourage you to do that, because this is a journey that we're going on here that's going to walk you through different leadership lessons that will help you live into the life that Christ has really called you for. He has called every single one of us to be a leader in our own right, and I want to give you the tools to be able to do that and to do that well. And one of the best ways I can do that is if you ask questions and you reach out and you touch base with me. So you can do that either on this podcast, wherever you find this podcast, or you can reach out to me on our Facebook page at Focus on Christ, or on our Instagram page at Focus on Christ, or on YouTube. You can drop a comment on YouTube as well if you happen to catch this in the video version on YouTube. So those are a couple of platforms that we're out there on that you can just drop a comment in there, and I'd love to be able to talk to you more. So the last thing I want to talk to you about is making sure that you've headed over to focusonchrist.com and you have checked out our website. There's a lot of tools on there that can really help you in your Christian walk. I know that the resources that I've given you are just invaluable and are really going to help you, and I just can't wait to see where you go. So if you want to share a story, I'd love to hear your story, and if you don't mind, I'd love to share it with our audience so that they can learn and grow through your experiences and not just mine. So I hope this helps. I hope it added value, and I'm super excited to talk to you guys next time. God bless.